The rain hammered against the metal walls of Mining Station Delta 7 as Chief Engineer Marcus Chen finished his evening rounds. The storm had been raging for 3 days now on this forsaken asteroid, and the constant drumming was starting to get on everyone's nerves. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter as he stepped outside to check the atmospheric processors one final time before calling it a night. That's when he heard it. A soft whimpering sound coming from behind the waste recycling unit. Marcus frowned and grabbed his flashlight, thinking it might be one of the station's maintenance drones malfunctioning. But as he rounded the corner, his light fell upon something that made him stumble backward in shock. Curled up in a ball between two large pipes was a dragon. Not one of the massive, terrifying beasts from the old Earth legends, but something much smaller and more pitiful. The creature was barely the size of a large dog, with scales that should have been a brilliant emerald green, but were now dulled by dirt and neglect. Her wings were folded tightly against her body, trembling from both cold and fear. "Holy stars," Marcus whispered, lowering his flashlight so it wouldn't blind the creature. The dragon's large golden eyes looked up at him with a mixture of hope and terror that nearly broke his heart. The young dragon tried to scramble away, but she was too weak to move properly. Marcus noticed several cuts on her wings and what looked like old burn marks along her side. Someone had hurt this creature, and recently too. "Easy there, little one," Marcus said softly, crouching down and extending his hand slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon's eyes widened at his words. She tilted her head, clearly understanding him but seeming surprised by his gentle tone. Most beings in the galaxy treated dragons with either fear or hatred, especially the smaller, more vulnerable ones like herself. Marcus had heard about dragons before, of course. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were an ancient species, once proud and powerful, but their numbers had dwindled over the centuries. The larger dragons were still feared and respected, but the smaller ones, like this young female, were often seen as pests or worse. Many colonies had bounties on dragon scales, and there was a thriving black market for dragon parts. "What are you doing out here all alone?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice low and calm. He could see the intelligence in her eyes. The way she was studying him, trying to figure out if he was a threat. The dragon opened her mouth and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "No one wants me," she said, the words coming out in perfect galactic standard, though heavily accented. "I'm too small to be feared, too weak to be useful. The others of my kind cast me out because I couldn't breathe fire properly. The other species chase me away because I'm still a dragon." Marcus felt a surge of anger at the cruelty she had obviously faced, but he kept his expression gentle. "Well, you're safe here," he said. "What's your name?" The dragon blinked in surprise, as if no one had asked her that question in a very long time. "Ember," she said finally. "My name is Ember." "I'm Marcus," he replied, slowly reaching into his jacket pocket. Ember tensed, ready to flee despite her weakness, but relaxed when Marcus pulled out a nutrition bar. He unwrapped it and held it out to her. "When was the last time you ate something?" Ember stared at the offered food as if it might be a trap. 3 days ago," she admitted. "I found some scraps behind a cantina on Proxima Station, but the owner chased me off with a shock stick." Marcus felt his jaw clench at the mental image, but he kept his voice gentle. "Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Here, take it." Ember reached out cautiously and took the nutrition bar with one small clawed hand. She sniffed it carefully before taking a tiny bite. Her eyes widened at the taste, and she had to force herself not to devour the entire thing at once. "Good?" Marcus asked with a small smile. Ember nodded, unable to speak with her mouth full. For the first time since he'd found her, she looked almost hopeful. Marcus glanced back at the station, thinking quickly. Regulations strictly forbade bringing unauthorized life forms aboard, but he couldn't just leave this injured creature out in the storm. His quarters were in the engineering section, away from most of the other crew. If he was careful, he might be able to keep her hidden until he figured out what to do. "Ember," he said, "how would you feel about coming inside where it's warm and dry, just for tonight, until this storm passes?" The dragon's eyes filled with tears, an oddly human expression on her reptilian features. "You would do that? For me?" "Of course," Marcus said without hesitation. "No one should have to sleep out in weather like this." Ember finished the nutrition bar and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Most beings would have called security by now," she said, "or tried to capture me for the bounty." Marcus stood up and extended his hand to help her. "Well, I'm not most beings. I'm human, and where I come from, we help those who need it." Ember stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before taking it. Her scales were surprisingly warm despite her obvious chill, and Marcus could feel her trembling as he helped her to her feet. She was even smaller than he had initially thought, probably not much more than 4 feet tall when standing upright. "I've never met a human before," Ember said as they walked toward the station's back entrance. "I heard they were dangerous warriors who conquered half the galaxy." Marcus chuckled softly. "Some of us are warriors, that's true. But most of us are just people trying to get by, same as everyone else. I fix machines and keep this old mining station running. Nothing too exciting." They reached the entrance, and Marcus quickly scanned his access card. The door slid open silently, and he gestured for Ember to follow him inside. The corridors were dimly lit for night cycle, and Marcus was grateful that most of the crew would be asleep or off duty. His quarters were small but comfortable, with a bed, a desk, and a small sitting area. Marcus immediately went to his personal storage unit and pulled out some medical supplies, while Ember stood near the door, looking around in wonder. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yeah, most of the time. Gets a bit lonely, but it's quiet for working." Marcus turned back to her with a medical scanner in his hand. "Would you mind if I took a look at those injuries? I'm not a doctor, but I know enough first aid to help with basic wounds." Ember hesitated, then nodded. "You've already done more for me than anyone has in months. I trust you." The simple faith in her words hit Marcus harder than he expected. As he ran the scanner over her injuries, he learned that most of them were indeed recent. The burns on her side were from energy weapons, probably security forces chasing her off yet another station. The cuts on her wings appeared to be from barbed wire or similar obstacles she had encountered while trying to find shelter. "This might sting a little," Marcus warned as he applied antiseptic to the worst of the cuts. Ember winced but didn't pull away. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "I really am just a useless dragon. I can't breathe fire like I'm supposed to. My magic is weak. I'm not strong enough to carry heavy loads or smart enough to be a scholar. Every dragon clan I've approached has turned me away." Marcus paused in his treatment and looked into her golden eyes. "You know what I think? I think being different doesn't make you useless. It just makes you special in a different way." Ember blinked in surprise. "Special? Sure," Marcus said, resuming his work on her injuries. "I've been an engineer for 15 years, and I've learned that sometimes the most valuable solutions come from thinking differently. Maybe you can't breathe fire like other dragons, but that doesn't mean you don't have other talents." "Like what?" Ember asked, genuinely curious. Marcus finished bandaging a particularly deep cut on her wing before answering. "Well, you speak Galactic Standard perfectly. That's not easy for most species. You found your way to this remote mining station, which means you're resourceful. And you've survived on your own for who knows how long, which takes real strength, even if it's not the kind that shows in your muscles." Ember was quiet for a moment, processing his words. "I never thought of it that way. she said finally. Marcus smiled as he put away the medical supplies. Sometimes we need someone else to help us see our own worth. He gestured to the small couch in his sitting area. Why don't you get some rest? We can figure out what to do next in the morning. Ember moved toward the couch, then hesitated. What if someone finds me here? You could get in trouble. Let me worry about that, Marcus said firmly. You're injured and exhausted. The most important thing right now is getting you healthy again. As Ember curled up on the couch, Marcus retrieved a spare blanket from his storage unit and gently draped it over her small form. The dragon's eyes were already drooping with exhaustion, but she managed to look up at him one more time. Thank you, Marcus, she whispered. For the first time in a very long time, I feel safe. Marcus felt a warm glow in his chest as he watched her drift off to sleep. He had always believed that actions defined a person more than words, and tonight he had proven to himself that his values meant something. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, a young dragon who had been abandoned by everyone finally had someone who cared about her well-being. As he prepared for bed himself, Marcus couldn't help but think that maybe Ember wasn't the only one who had been lonely. The mining station had always felt empty and isolated, but tonight, with the soft sound of peaceful breathing coming from his sitting area, it felt more like a home. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside Marcus's quarters, two unlikely friends had found something rare and precious in the vastness of space. They had found each other, and for both of them, that made all the difference in the galaxy. Marcus woke to the soft sound of humming coming from his small kitchen area. For a moment, he was confused. Then the memories of the previous night came flooding back. He sat up quickly and saw Ember standing near his food processor, carefully examining the various buttons and displays with fascination. "Good morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Ember turned around, her golden eyes bright with curiosity. "Good morning, Marcus. I hope you don't mind, but I was trying to understand how this machine works. It's fascinating how humans can make devices that transform basic proteins into complete meals." Marcus blinked in surprise. Most people took food processors for granted, but Ember was studying it like it was the most interesting piece of technology she had ever seen. "You like engineering?" "I love figuring out how things work," Ember said, her voice becoming animated for the first time since he had met her. "When I was very young, before my clan cast me out, I used to sneak into the workshops where the older dragons maintained our ancient technologies. They always chased me away, but I learned so much just by watching." Marcus stood up and joined her in the kitchen area. "What kind of technologies did your people have?" Ember's expression grew wistful. "Beautiful things. Crystal matrices that could store vast amounts of information, harmonic resonators that could purify water or air, gravity manipulators that were smaller than your hand but could lift massive stones." She sighed deeply. "But I was never allowed to touch them. Dragons are supposed to be creatures of raw power and magic, not delicate engineering. My fascination with mechanisms was seen as another sign of my inadequacy." Marcus felt another surge of anger at how this remarkable young being had been treated. "Their loss," he said firmly. "Would you like to see how the food processor works?" Ember's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? You would show me?" For the next hour, Marcus explained the basic principles behind various pieces of equipment in his quarters. Ember absorbed every word, asking intelligent questions that showed she understood not just what each component did, but why it was designed that way. Her natural intuition for mechanical systems was extraordinary. "You have a real gift for this," Marcus said as Ember successfully programmed the food processor to create breakfast for both of them. "Have you ever considered formal engineering training?" Ember's excited expression faded. "No academy would accept me. Dragons aren't welcome in most educational institutions, and even if they were, I don't have any credentials or references. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," Marcus said firmly. "You're brilliant, and I might have an idea about that, but first we need to deal with a more immediate problem." Before Ember could ask what he meant, Marcus's communicator chirped with an incoming message. He glanced at the display and grimaced. "Station Administrator Morrison wants to see me in her office in 30 minutes. Someone might have spotted you last night." Fear flashed across Ember's features. "I should go. I don't want to get you in trouble." "Absolutely not," Marcus said without hesitation. "You're still healing, and there's nowhere safe for you to go. Stay here and keep the door locked. If anyone comes by, hide in the storage compartment behind my desk. I'll handle Morrison." 30 minutes later, Marcus stood in Administrator Morrison's office, trying to look casual while his heart pounded. Morrison was a stern woman in her 50s who ran the mining station with military precision. She looked up from her datapad with sharp eyes. "Chen," she said without preamble. "Security Chief Valdez reports that sensors detected an unregistered biological signature near the engineering section last night. Do you know anything about this?" Marcus had prepared for this question during his walk to the office. "I did hear some strange sounds during the storm," he said truthfully. "Thought it might be debris getting blown around." "The sensors have been acting up lately with all the atmospheric interference." Morrison studied his face carefully. "The signature disappeared around 0200 hours and hasn't been detected since. If there was some kind of stray animal, it's either dead or moved on." "Probably just interference from the storm," Marcus agreed, keeping his voice steady. Morrison nodded slowly, but her expression remained suspicious. "Keep an eye out for anything unusual. The last thing we need is some kind of pest infestation in the systems." Marcus felt his jaw clench at hearing Ember referred to as a pest, but he managed to keep his expression neutral. "Of course, Administrator. I'll run a full sensor sweep of the engineering section today." "See that you do." Morrison turned back to her datapad, dismissing him. Marcus made his way back to his quarters, his mind racing. He had bought them some time, but it wouldn't last long. Morrison was too smart and too thorough to be fooled by sensor glitches indefinitely. He needed a permanent solution, and fast. When he entered his quarters, he found Ember exactly where he had left her, but she was no longer alone. Floating in the air around her were several small mechanical components from his workbench, moving in precise patterns while she studied them with intense concentration. "That's incredible," Marcus breathed, watching a complex gear assembly rotate slowly in midair. "I thought you said your magic was weak." Ember startled, and the components immediately dropped to the floor with a series of metallic clinks. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have touched your things. It's just that when I'm stressed, sometimes I can make small objects move. And these parts were calling to me somehow." Marcus knelt down and carefully examined the components. They were completely undamaged despite their fall. "Don't apologize. This is amazing. You have telekinetic abilities?" "Very weak ones," Ember said sadly. "Most dragons can lift boulders or hurl massive objects across vast distances. I can barely manage tools and small parts. It's another way I'm defective." Marcus stood up and looked at her seriously. "Ember, what you just showed me isn't defective. It's perfect." "Perfect?" Ember looked confused. "Think about it," Marcus said, his excitement growing. "Heavy lifting is easy. Any industrial robot can move boulders. But precision work, manipulating delicate components without damaging them, that's incredibly difficult and valuable." To demonstrate his point, Marcus pulled up a holographic schematic of one of the station's atmospheric processors. "See this component here? The quantum resonance chamber. When it breaks down, it takes our best technicians hours to repair because the parts are so delicate and the space is so cramped. But with your abilities..." Ember studied the schematic, her engineering intuition immediately grasping the implications. "I could reach the components without disassembling the entire unit," she said slowly. and manipulate them without risking damage from clumsy tools. Exactly, Marcus said. Ember, you're not a failed dragon. You're a natural engineer with abilities that could revolutionize maintenance and repair work. For the first time since he had met her, Ember stood up straight, her posture reflecting growing confidence. Do you really think so? I know so, Marcus said firmly. In fact, I want to make you an offer. How would you like to become my assistant, officially? Ember's eyes widened. You mean actually work here? But I'm not qualified. I don't have any certifications or training records. Marcus smiled. Leave that to me. I'm going to register you as a specialist consultant in precision mechanical manipulation. It's a legitimate job category, and your abilities definitely qualify. As for training, I'll be your mentor and sponsor. We'll start with basic safety certifications and work our way up. Tears began to form in Ember's golden eyes. You would do that for me? Risk your career to give me a chance? It's not just charity, Ember, Marcus said honestly. This station needs someone with your skills. And beyond that, I think we make a good team. Before Ember could respond, Marcus's communicator chirped again. This time it was an emergency alert. One of the primary atmospheric processors had suffered a critical malfunction, and the backup systems were struggling to compensate. Duty calls, Marcus said, grabbing his toolkit. He paused at the door and looked back at Ember. Want to see if those abilities of yours are as useful as I think they are? Ember's expression transformed from uncertainty to determination. Let's go fix something. The atmospheric processor was located in one of the deepest sections of the station, a maze of pipes, conduits, and mechanical systems that kept the artificial environment stable. When they arrived, Marcus could see immediately that the problem was worse than the initial reports had indicated. The quantum resonance chamber has completely destabilized, reported Technician Hayes, one of Marcus's team. We've tried everything, but we can't get the replacement components into position without shutting down the entire system. And if we do that, Section C will be without life support for at least 6 hours. Marcus studied the situation, then looked at Ember. Think you can help? Ember approached the massive processor unit and extended her senses, feeling for the delicate components inside. I can sense the damaged parts, she said quietly, and I think I can position the new ones, but I'll need someone to guide me. I can feel the mechanical structures, but I can't see them clearly. No problem, Marcus said, pulling up a detailed holographic display. Hayes, hand me that replacement resonance crystal. What followed was the most precise repair work Marcus had ever witnessed. With Ember's telekinetic abilities providing perfect positioning and Marcus's expertise guiding the process, they were able to replace the damaged components without even partially shutting down the system. The entire repair took less than an hour instead of the 6 to 8 hours that would have been required using conventional methods. Incredible, Hayes whispered as the processor hummed back to full efficiency. How did you do that? Marcus glanced at Ember, who was trying to look invisible, despite having just performed what was essentially a miracle of engineering. Team effort, he said simply. Hayes, I'd like you to meet Ember. She's going to be joining our maintenance crew as a precision manipulation specialist. Hayes looked confused for a moment, then noticed Ember's reptilian features. To his credit, after his initial surprise, he stepped forward and extended his hand. Pleasure to meet you, Ember. That was the most amazing repair work I've ever seen. Ember shook his hand shyly. Thank you. Marcus taught me well. I think it was the other way around, Marcus said with a smile. As they walked back through the station corridors, Ember was quiet and thoughtful. Finally, she spoke up. Marcus, do you think the others will accept me? I know Technician Hayes was polite, but when word gets around that there's a dragon working in engineering... Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. Ember, let me tell you something about humans. We're not perfect, and some of us can be just as prejudiced as any other species. But we have a saying, Actions speak louder than words. You just helped prevent a life support crisis that could have endangered dozens of people. When word of that gets around, it won't matter what species you are. Ember nodded slowly, but Marcus could see she was still worried. Besides, he added with a grin, you're under my protection now, and I have a reputation around here for being very protective of my team. As they reached Marcus's quarters, Ember suddenly stopped and looked up at him. Marcus, why are humans like this? Every other species I've encountered follows strict hierarchies and traditions. They reject anything different or unusual. But you saw value in me when no one else would. You took a risk to help someone you barely knew. Is this normal for your people? Marcus considered the question carefully. I think humans learned early in our development that diversity makes us stronger. We've always been explorers and innovators, and we discovered that the best solutions often come from unexpected places. When we reached the stars and met other species, we brought that philosophy with us. It's a beautiful way to live, Ember said softly. It has its advantages, Marcus agreed. Tomorrow we'll start your official training program. By the time we're done, you'll be the best precision engineer in this sector of the galaxy. As they settled in for the evening, Ember curled up in her now familiar spot on the couch while Marcus prepared his reports for the day. But this time, instead of fear and uncertainty, there was hope in the air. A young dragon who had been rejected by everyone had finally found not just acceptance, but purpose. And Marcus had discovered that sometimes the most valuable things in the universe came in the most unexpected packages. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the main conference room of Mining Station Delta 7, watching with pride as Ember presented her latest innovation to a gathering of station administrators and visiting engineers from the Colonial Engineering Guild. The small dragon had transformed dramatically from the frightened, injured creature he had found in the rain. Her scales now gleamed with health and confidence, and her voice carried the authority of someone who truly understood her craft. The modular repair system can reduce maintenance time by up to 70%, Ember explained, manipulating a holographic display with precise gestures while simultaneously demonstrating her technique with actual components floating in the air around her. By combining telekinetic manipulation with predictive diagnostic algorithms, we can perform repairs in spaces previously considered inaccessible. Administrator Morrison, who had initially been skeptical about hiring a dragon, now leaned forward with genuine interest. What about scalability? Could this technique be taught to other engineers? Ember nodded enthusiastically. We've already begun developing training protocols. While the telekinetic component requires specific abilities, the diagnostic and procedural innovations can be applied using specialized robotic tools. Marcus and I have designed prototype systems that could be deployed throughout the colonial infrastructure. Marcus felt a warm glow of satisfaction as he watched the visiting engineers taking notes and asking detailed questions. In just 3 months, Ember had not only mastered conventional engineering techniques, but had begun innovating in ways that were revolutionizing their entire approach to maintenance and repair work. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. There had been initial resistance from some crew members and a few complaints to colonial administration about the irregular hiring practices. But those concerns had evaporated quickly when Ember's work began producing undeniable results. Equipment downtime had been reduced by 60%. Repair costs had plummeted, and several previously impossible repairs had been completed with ease. More importantly, Ember had begun to blossom as an individual. The shy, frightened dragon who had whispered, "No one wants me," was now confidently fielding technical questions from some of the most respected engineers in the colony. She had found her place in the universe, and it was magnificent to witness. After the presentation concluded, the visiting engineers crowded around Ember, eager to discuss the practical applications of her techniques. Marcus stepped back to give her space, but caught her eye across the room. She gave him a quick smile and a small nod of acknowledgement before returning to her conversation with a senior engineer from the guild. Quite remarkable, said a voice beside him. Marcus turned to see Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, the Colonial Engineering Guild's chief technology assessor. I've reviewed her work extensively, and I have to say, this young dragon has a gift that transcends species boundaries. She's incredible, Marcus agreed. The most intuitive engineer I've ever worked with. Dr. Hawthorne studied him carefully. You took quite a risk, sponsoring her for certification without any formal credentials. The Guild has received several inquiries about your decision. Marcus felt his protective instincts stir. Are you questioning my judgment, Doctor? On the contrary, Dr. Hawthorne said with a smile. I'm here to offer her a position. The Guild wants to establish a new research division focused on precision engineering techniques. We'd like Ember to head the program. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in Ember's achievements, excitement for her opportunities, and an unexpected pang of loss at the thought of her leaving. That's wonderful, he said, meaning it despite his personal feelings. She deserves recognition for her work. We'd also like to offer you the position of Deputy Director, Dr. Hawthorne continued. Your mentorship has been instrumental in her development, and your own innovations in adaptive engineering protocols have been impressive. Marcus blinked in surprise. You're offering both of us positions? The best teams are built on trust and complementary skills, Dr. Hawthorne said. From everything I've observed, you two represent exactly that kind of partnership. Before Marcus could respond, Ember appeared at his side, her golden eyes bright with excitement. Marcus, Dr. Hawthorne has been telling me about the research position. Can you believe it? They want me to lead an entire division. I heard, Marcus said, unable to suppress a grin at her enthusiasm. It's an incredible opportunity. Ember's expression suddenly grew more serious. She offered you the deputy position too, didn't she? Marcus nodded. Good, Ember said firmly, because I told her I wouldn't even consider the offer unless you were part of the team. We're partners, Marcus. We work best together. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. In 3 months, this remarkable young dragon had gone from having no one in the universe to being offered prestigious positions by the most respected engineering organization in the colonies. And her first thought was to ensure he was included. Are you sure? He asked. This is your moment, Ember. You've earned this recognition. Ember's expression grew soft. Marcus, 3 months ago I was convinced I was worthless. No one wanted me because I didn't fit their expectations of what a dragon should be. But you saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You didn't just give me a job, you gave me a future. We're a team, and I'm not breaking up the team. Dr. Hawthorne watched their exchange with interest. I take it that's a yes from both of you? Marcus looked at Ember, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, he said. We accept. Excellent, Dr. Hawthorne said. You'll be based on Centauri Prime, with access to the best research facilities in the colonies. Your first project will be developing training protocols for precision engineering techniques that can be adapted across species and skill sets. As Dr. Paul Hawthorne walked away to make arrangements, Marcus and Ember found themselves alone in the conference room. The afternoon light from the station's artificial sun cast warm patterns across the walls, and for a moment, they stood in comfortable silence. Are you nervous? Marcus asked. Terrified, Ember admitted with a laugh, but also more excited than I've ever been in my life. A few months ago, I was sleeping in the rain, convinced that I was a failed dragon with no purpose. Now I'm going to head a research division for the Colonial Engineering Guild. You were never a failed dragon, Marcus said gently. You were just a dragon who hadn't found the right place yet. Ember turned to face him fully. Marcus, I need you to understand something. When I was cast out from my clan, I thought my life was over. Dragons are supposed to be part of communities, part of something larger than themselves. I spent months believing I would always be alone. She gestured around the conference room, where the remnants of her presentation still glowed in the holographic displays. But this, what we've built together, this is my clan now. Not just you, but Hayes and the other engineers, Administrator Morrison, everyone who's accepted me as part of the team. You didn't just give me a job, you gave me a family. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. You gave me something too, you know. This place felt like just another assignment before you arrived. But watching you grow, seeing your innovations, being part of your success, it's made everything feel meaningful. So we're agreed? Ember asked with a grin. Partners for the long haul? Partners, Marcus confirmed, extending his hand. Ember shook it firmly, then surprised him by pulling him into a quick hug. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. As they began packing up the presentation materials, Marcus's communicator chirped with an incoming message. He glanced at the display and raised an eyebrows. It's from the Dragon Council of Elders. They want to schedule a meeting with you. Ember's expression grew complicated. The council? They've never wanted anything to do with me before. Marcus scanned the message more carefully. According to this, they've heard about your innovations and want to discuss potential applications for dragon technology. It seems your reputation has reached even the most traditional corners of dragon society. Ember was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. You know what's funny? She said finally. 3 months ago, a message like that would have meant everything to me. I would have dropped everything for a chance to prove myself to my own people. And now? Marcus asked. Now I realize that I don't need their approval anymore, Ember said with quiet confidence. I found my place in the universe, and it's not defined by what other dragons think I should be. If they want to work with me, they can respect me as the engineer and researcher I've become. Marcus smiled at the strength in her voice. What do you want to tell them? Ember thought for a moment, then smiled. Tell them I'm honored by their interest, but I'm currently committed to a research project with the Colonial Engineering Guild. If they'd like to discuss potential collaboration between dragon technology and guild innovations, they can schedule a formal meeting through proper diplomatic channels. Very professional, Marcus said, typing out the response. I learned from the best, Ember replied. As they finished packing up and prepared to leave the conference room, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey they had both taken. 3 months ago, he had found a frightened, injured dragon in the rain and made a simple decision to help someone in need. That one act of basic kindness had transformed both their lives in ways he never could have imagined. Ember had grown from a rejected outcast into a respected engineer and innovator, but more than that, she had discovered her own worth and learned to value herself not for what others expected her to be, but for who she truly was. And Marcus had learned that sometimes the most important discoveries weren't found in equations or mechanical systems, but in the connections between individuals who chose to see the best in each other. Ready for the next adventure? Ember asked as they walked toward the door. Marcus looked at his young partner and friend, her scales gleaming with health and confidence, her eyes bright with the excitement of new challenges ahead. With you? I'm ready for anything. As they left the conference room together, their reflection caught in the polished metal of the doorframe. Marcus smiled at what he saw. Not a human and a dragon, not a mentor and a student, but 2 engineers and friends who had found in each other exactly what the universe had been waiting to give them all along. 6 months later, their names would be known throughout the colonies as the team that revolutionized precision engineering. A year later, their techniques would be taught in engineering schools across 3 systems. But in that moment, walking through the corridors of Mining Station Delta 7, they were simply 2 beings who had discovered that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a single act of compassion in the rain. Behind them, The holographic displays still showed traces of Ember's presentation, mathematical equations and engineering schematics that represented not just technical innovation, but the beautiful truth that every being in the universe has value if only someone is wise enough to recognize it. The young dragon who had once murmured, "No one wants me," now knew with absolute certainty that she was wanted, valued, and loved exactly as she was. And in a galaxy that often seemed divided by differences, that simple truth represented the most powerful force of all: the endless human capacity to see potential where others see only problems, and to transform rejection into belonging through the simple power of believing in one another.